So, um, imagine stepping up to the very edge of this monumental transition in your life. Like you are standing right there on the threshold.
Right.
You can perceive the reality you want, and it's hovering just on the other side of this seemingly invisible membrane. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps you're preparing to initiate this profoundly visionary undertaking, or, well, you're seeking an immense structural transformation of your own character.
Hmm?
Or maybe you're aiming for an entirely unprecedented tier of achievement in whatever arena you're in.
Exactly.
You possess the raw, unrefined talent. You have generated a vast reservoir of drive, and the architecture of your ambition is like practically mapped out in the forefront of your consciousness.
But you're stuck.
Right. There is a barrier holding you completely stationary. You try to apply pressure. You exert a tremendous magnitude of effort, but you simply cannot break through to the other side. You are entirely confined.
Yeah, it is an incredibly pervasive sensation. I mean, one that echoes across the entirety of human experience, really.
Well, that's for sure.
It's that highly specific frustration of recognizing your own immense potential, only to find it locked behind, like a pane of impenetrable, transparent glass.
Yes, exactly that. You can see right through it.
Right. You can visualize the destination with absolute clarity, but the atmospheric friction of actually moving toward it feels, well, dense. It feels almost suffocating and ultimately insurmountable.
And if you are like the overwhelming majority of people who possess this relentless dedication to their own evolution, you've undoubtedly analyzed this invisible barrier. You know, you have given it a name.
Right. The usual labels.
Yeah, you likely refer to it as your internal resistance or your self-limiting framework. So what is the natural human response to that?
You declare war.
Exactly. You declare war. You attempt to overwrite the internal narrative through sheer, unadulterated repetition of opposing ideas.
Which is exhausting.
So exhausting. You try to forcefully drive your consciousness through the friction using just an immense expenditure of willpower. But the density remains.
Yeah, and it actually gets worse. Right. In fact, it often feels as though the greater the force you apply against these mental boundaries, the more exhausted and depleted you become. You are experiencing a profound biological and psychological drain from constantly engaging in combat with your own cognition.
Yep.
You feel like you are applying all the universally accepted methodologies flawlessly, but you continue to collide with a solid wall. Era after era, cycle after cycle.
And that resulting exhaustion is the critical diagnostic indicator here. The sheer energetic and physiological expenditure required to fight one's own internal architecture is staggering.
It's massive.
It actively siphons away the precise life force, the essential creative current that is fundamentally required to generate the new reality you are attempting to step into.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Like, when you are engaged in a perpetual internal conflict, there is simply no surplus energy available for external creation. Which perfectly brings us to the fundamental mission of our exploration today. We are looking at a vast constellation of philosophical frameworks and physiological mechanics to completely invert your understanding of cognition.
A total inversion, yes.
Right. We want to completely flip your understanding of reality and of these so-called mental boundaries. So consider this initial proposition. What if the very act of attempting to escape your mental limitations is the exact mechanism keeping you imprisoned?
That is the core of it right there.
Let me offer a different way to visualize this. Fighting your internal resistance is not like breaking down a wall. It is like trying to calm a turbulent pool of water by aggressively slapping the surface with your open hands.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Every strike you make, every ounce of force you apply to destroy the turbulence only generates a multitude of chaotic new waves. You are literally feeding the chaos with your own kinetic energy.
That is a remarkably accurate mechanical analogy because, to truly comprehend the architecture of what is happening in those moments of struggle, we have to reorient our perspective completely.
Right.
We need to examine the fundamental mechanics of existence itself. We have to establish a foundational premise, like the absolute ground floor of the human operational system.
Okay, lay it on us.
And that premise is that the universe you experience is fundamentally and entirely mental.
Completely mental.
Completely. The external physical realm that we navigate through our sensory apparatus is merely a canvas. It functions as a projection screen for your internal psychological architecture.
Okay, wait, I need to...
The external environment does not forge your internal state. Rather, your internal state continuously projects and solidifies the external environment.
See, I need to stop you right there, because that is a colossal claim to make right out of the gate. We are conditioned to believe the exact opposite.
Oh, universally, yeah.
right? Like, we are taught that the world acts upon us, that the physical environment is a hard, immutable reality, and our thoughts are just, fragile, fleeting reactions happening inside the protective shell of our skulls.
Which is completely backward.
Right. So you are suggesting we need to completely invert that hierarchy. You are saying the physical landscape isn't happening to us at all. It is a direct, compliant response to our internal configuration.
That is precisely the inversion that must occur. The physical world is entirely secondary. It is the echo, not the original sound.
The echo.
Yeah. And once we accept this hierarchy, it leads us to our first major realization, a concept that, frankly, completely destabilizes the conventional wisdom surrounding personal evolution.
Let's hear it.
The foundational assertion is this. There's actually no such thing as a limiting belief in the way our current culture categorizes them.
None.
Because the very nature of a belief is to establish a limit. Every single conviction, every accepted truth, by its fundamental definition, encloses the consciousness of the believer inside a conceptual boundary.
It puts you in a box.
Exactly. It places you entirely inside a box.
Okay, wait, I want to challenge that because I understand that a belief like I am incapable of success is a boundary. That's obvious.
Right.
But what about the universally celebrated, highly optimistic convictions? What about a belief like I possess an infinite capacity to learn and grow? Are you genuinely classifying that as a limitation?
Not you.
Are you saying even the most expansive, positive mindsets are still just boxes?
Without question. Even the most magnificent, brilliantly illuminated, and empowering conviction is still a boundary.
Really?
Yes. Because when an individual adopts any worldview, no matter how optimistic, they are defining the specific parameters of their reality. A belief is a framework, is an architectural structure.
Oh, okay, I see.
You simply cannot construct a framework without establishing edges. The great pervasive misunderstanding of our current era is this frantic, relentless desire to live in a state of absolute boundlessness.
To exist completely without a box.
Exactly. But that is an impossibility within the mechanics of the human experience. The physical manifestation of consciousness requires a structural framework to process the infinite nature of reality.
Because otherwise it's just chaos.
Exactly. Without a boundary, there is only a vast, undifferentiated void of potential. The goal of human evolution is not to wander aimlessly into an infinite void without a container.
Right.
The goal is to deliberately, consciously engineer a container that perfectly encompasses your desired experience.
Okay, that clarifies a massive point of confusion. Because we spend a tremendous amount of our lives complaining about the fact that we are locked inside a room.
Yes, constantly.
We feel the walls, we resent the walls, we throw all of our energy into punching the walls and screaming at the limitations of our architecture. But you are pointing out that we are always going to require a room to exist in this dimension.
We have to have one.
So the trick isn't to obliterate the concept of a room entirely. The trick is recognizing that we hold the master blueprints, and we have the authority to construct a sprawling penthouse suite rather than languishing in a damp, restrictive dungeon.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to phrase it. You are simultaneously the architect, the primary builder, and the sole occupant of your reality.
Wow.
And the tragedy is that a vast multitude of individuals have unconsciously inherited the blueprints for a subterranean dungeon.
Inherited from where?
From their environment, from collective societal assumptions. And they constructed this dungeon flawlessly. Now they sit inside the darkness, shivering, lamenting the dampness and the absolute lack of light.
Fully convinced that the dungeon is the objective reality of the universe.
Yes. They believe their confinement is the ultimate, inescapable truth of the external world. But the subconscious compliance engine does not recognize objective truth.
The subconscious compliance engine. I like that.
Yeah, because there is no independent objective truth waiting in the external physical reality. There is only the instruction set that the subconscious accepts as true.
So the external environment isn't this stubborn, fixed entity.
Yeah.
It is actually waiting for an architectural blueprint to execute.
Exactly. The external environment is a realm of absolute compliance. Whatever you hold as a fundamental conviction becomes the primordial law of your personal universe.
So if my blueprint says the world is terrible.
If your accepted blueprint dictates that the world is an intensely hostile landscape where resources are fiercely guarded and perpetually scarce, your subconscious compliance engine will immediately organize your sensory perception to match.
And your biological impulses, too, I imagine.
Yes, entirely. To navigate a hostile, scarce world, it will literally cause your visual cortex to overlook vast oceans of opportunity that directly contradict your belief.
Just ignore them completely.
Simply because acknowledging those opportunities would violate the primordial law you have forcefully established.
Let me see if I can ground that in a mechanical way. It is somewhat like an atmospheric filter. Like if you place a localized filter around your perception that only permits the frequency of struggle to pass through, then your entire universe is comprised solely of struggle.
That's precisely how it works.
You don't argue with the atmosphere, you just breathe it in and assume that is all there is. And if another person standing right next to you has a filter that only permits the frequency of abundance, they are interacting with a completely different atmospheric reality.
Yes.
Yet, you are both physically standing in the exact same spatial coordinates.
And if you were to interact, you would fiercely debate one another over the true nature of those coordinates. You would both provide endless streams of experiential evidence to prove your point.
Right. Look at my life, it's terrible. Look at mine, it's great.
Exactly. Completely failing to realize that the truth each of you experiences is entirely dictated by the internal filter. Which seamlessly brings us to a crucial, highly technical element of this exploration.
The actual construction process.
Yes, the construction process of these filters. How is a mental box built? Beliefs are not merely passive phenomena.
They aren't just thoughts.
No, they are not fleeting, weightless ideas that drift through your consciousness like leaves on a breeze. A belief is a very specific piece of biological and energetic engineering.
Okay, unpack that for us.
It is a repeated thought that has been deliberately fused with an intense emotional charge.
Let's ice that mechanism because it sounds like the core formula of everything we are discussing today.
Yeah.
The combination of a repeated thought completely fused with an intense emotional charge.
That's the formula.
That specific amalgamation is what generates a belief. But how does that actually work mechanically? Like, I want to push past the abstract philosophy here.
To understand the sheer power of that mechanism, we have to examine the biological and electromagnetic reality of the human organism. Humans are not merely flesh and bone. We are highly sophisticated electromagnetic generators. The conscious mind operates through a cascade of electrical signals. Every single time you process a thought, there is a literal electrical firing, an action potential surging across your neural pathways.
A spark of electrical current.
Yes, illuminating the darkness of the brain's architecture.
So the mind is the electrical component. It generates the spark.
Yes, the thought provides the electrical directive. Now, we must look at the biological function of the heart in this context.
Okay.
The heart does not just pump fluid, it generates a massive magnetic field through the experience of emotion.
Really? Emotion is magnetic.
Emotion is not just a poetic feeling, it is a highly concentrated magnetic frequency. When an electrical thought from the brain is repeated continuously, and it is forcefully combined with a corresponding magnetic emotion from the heart, it creates a unified electromagnetic signature.
And what happens to that signature?
This unique signature permeates the subconscious architecture. The subconscious functions as the fertile soil, the absolute unyielding womb of reality. Whatever electromagnetic seed you plant within that space, it will relentlessly draw the necessary components from the infinite potential of the universe to grow that exact signature into your tangible physical experience.
I want to make sure the listener is absorbing the immense weight of this concept. We are moving far beyond motivational psychology here.
Far beyond it.
We are discussing the literal, measurable anatomy of creation. The electrical impulses from your neurological network, combined with the magnetic resonance radiating from your emotional center, literally form a localized gravitational field.
Yes.
And that field pulls your reality into existence.
It is the fundamental machinery of existence. And understanding this machinery leads us to a highly radical, almost unsettling conceptualization of our internal life.
Unsettling is right.
Because once a belief is forged in this crucible, once an electrical thought and a magnetic emotion are deeply embedded in the subconscious, it begins to undergo a transformation.
What kind of transformation?
It ceases to be a mere concept and begins to function as an autonomous energetic construct within your personal field.
Hold on. Autonomous. Are you implying that a belief becomes a literal entity?
Mechanically speaking, yes.
Like some kind of energetic parasite living inside our consciousness? Because, I mean, that sounds like we are crossing the border into science fiction or ancient mysticism. I need you to clarify what you mean by autonomous construct.
I am not suggesting it possesses a soul or independent consciousness, but from a purely mechanical standpoint, it behaves as a localized system with a singular blind intelligence.
Okay, a blind intelligence.
Consider it like a complex, self-sustaining algorithm running in the background of your operating system. The algorithm has only one directive programmed into it: survival.
It wants to live.
It must perpetuate its own existence. And in order for this energetic construct to survive and maintain its structural integrity within your field, it requires continuous sustenance.
It needs food.
Yes. Its food is your emotional energy. Specifically, it must feed upon the exact emotional frequency that matched its original creation.
So if we trace this back to the daily grinding struggles of an individual, are you suggesting that if someone holds a deeply ingrained conviction, let's say they harbor the belief that I must endure intense suffering and humiliation to achieve even a fragment of recognition?
A very common belief.
Right. Is that belief essentially a hungry, energetic algorithm demanding to be fed by their ongoing misery?
That is the precise mechanism at play, and it is both fascinating and terrifying. That specific algorithmic construct will actively, though blindly, orchestrate scenarios within your physical environment.
You get fed.
To provoke the exact lower frequency emotions it requires for sustenance, it will subtly hijack your intuitive impulses, guiding you to form alliances with deeply incompatible partners.
Wow.
It will cloud your cognitive processing, causing you to overlook elegant, simple solutions, compelling you instead to choose the most convoluted, agonizing, and exhausting path available.
And it's doing this on purpose.
It does all of this not out of malice, but out of a blind mechanical necessity to generate the emotional resonance of struggle so that it may continue to exist.
That reframes the entire concept of self-sabotage. I mean, it means the immense friction I experience in my life isn't some external judgment from the universe punishing me for my flaws.
Not at all.
It is my own internally generated construct demanding its daily sustenance. It actively wants me to experience the friction so that I generate the emotion of intense frustration.
Precisely.
Because that specific frequency of frustration is the only fuel that keeps the architecture of the belief intact.
It forms a flawless closed-loop system. And the most dangerous, insidious mechanism operating within this loop is a phenomenon we can identify as the trap of the artificial ego boost.
The artificial ego boost.
Yes. These autonomous beliefs do not merely cause random chaos. They specifically manifest circumstances in your external reality to trick your conscious mind into confirming their absolute validity.
They trick you.
They create the exact physical evidence needed to make you willingly choose to feed them.
This sounds incredibly manipulative. Walk me through the mechanics of this trap. How does an energetic construct trick the conscious mind in real time? I want a clear scenario of how this plays out in a person's life.
Let us examine a deeply universal scenario. Consider an individual who has internalized the profound, heavy conviction that they are fundamentally disadvantaged by the universe.
Yeah.
They have fused the thought, I am structurally behind, with the intense emotion of resentment. They believe with every fiber of their being that they are required to labor with a magnitude of intensity far exceeding anyone else, merely to reap a tiny fraction of the standard reward.
That is a tremendously dense and suffocating box to live inside.
It is incredibly dense. Now, because the external reality acts in perfect compliance with the subconscious instruction set, their physical life begins to perfectly mirror this blueprint.
Right, the universe complies.
When presented with a task, they instinctively bypass the efficient route and unnecessarily complicate the process. They exert a monumental amount of physical and mental energy when a calm, strategic approach would have easily sufficed.
They just brine themselves down.
They push their biological avatar to the point of absolute exhaustion. And finally, after an agonizing cycle of exertion, they achieve a mere fragment of their original desired outcome.
And what is their immediate psychological response to that?
They look at their meager, hard-won, exhausted results, and they view them as absolute, undeniable, objective proof.
I see exactly where this is going. They look at the chaos and say, look, I told you. The world is exactly as difficult and hostile as I suspected.
Exactly.
I worked endlessly, I bled for this, and I barely moved an inch.
Precisely. And in that exact moment of declaration, they experience a highly dangerous, intoxicating psychological phenomenon, the artificial ego boost.
Wow.
Deep within their neurochemistry, they feel a fleeting, powerful surge of vindication, a profound sense of, see, I was right. The universe really is rigged against me. My worldview is perfectly accurate.
That is profoundly twisted. They are literally receiving a biochemical hit of dopamine, a rush of deep validation derived entirely from their own suffering.
Simply because the suffering provides the evidence that their internal architecture is correct.
It is a lethal loop. The human ego, the identity construct navigating the physical realm, possesses a blinding addiction to being correct.
We love being right.
It fundamentally prefers the familiar certainty of being right in its misery over the terrifying vulnerability of being proven wrong and stepping into a realm of boundless ease.
That's wild.
When the physical reality flawlessly reflects the heavy, negative belief that addiction to being right is fed, the vindication hardens the edges of their chosen box, making the walls of the dungeon even more impenetrable.
I want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a moment, because this is the pivot point of the entire analysis. I want you to examine a persistent, repeating area of friction in your own life.
It's a great exercise.
Look at the struggle you complain about the most. Now, I want to challenge you with a very uncomfortable question. Do you prefer the righteous vindication of being correct about your limitations? Or do you actually want to step into your desired reality?
You have to choose. Right, because the mechanics we are discussing indicate that you absolutely cannot hold both. You cannot fiercely cling to the intoxicating proof of your own struggle while simultaneously asking the universe to provide a life of fluid abundance. You have to drop the addiction to being right about your own prison.
And when we pull back and view this mechanism within the broader context of human behavior, it reveals a tragedy of profound proportions.
It really does.
We grip our suffering with an astonishing white-knuckled intensity because it serves as undeniable proof that our worldview is accurate. We are so consumed with the accuracy of the reflection that we utterly fail to realize that the worldview itself generated the suffering in the first place.
We are projecting it.
We are throwing a celebration for the flawless clarity of a mirror, completely ignoring the fact that we are the ones holding up a grotesque, terrifying painting for it to reflect.
That is the staggering way to visualize the absurdity of the human condition. We are standing on the battlements, fiercely defending the walls of our own prison, simply because we are so immensely proud of our own masonry skills.
Exactly.
So the ultimate question becomes one of mechanical intervention. If we are trapped in this self-sustaining loop, where our beliefs demand emotional food, generate suffering to get it, and then reward us with an artificial dopamine hit for being right about the suffering, how do we disrupt the cycle?
How do we get out?
Yeah, how do we shift this immense paradigm?
To permanently escape the gravitational pull of these misaligned constructs, one must grasp a critical structural distinction regarding their own nature. We must understand the fundamental difference between the avatar and the field of boundless universal potentiality.
Okay, define avatar for us.
By avatar, I'm referring to the egoic identity, the physical sensory vehicle that you use to navigate this dense, tangible realm. The avatar is the localized point of consciousness.
Okay, so the avatar is the physical self navigating the world, and boundless potentiality is the infinite field it operates within.
Yes. The critical error occurs when an individual attempts to operate solely from the perspective of the avatar.
Just using the physical body.
Right. The physical vehicle is bound by severe inherent limitations. Your physical sensory apparatus can only perceive an infinitesimally small sliver of the actual electromagnetic spectrum surrounding you.
We only see a tiny fraction.
Your biological energy reserves are finite and easily depleted. If you attempt to forcefully manipulate the vast architecture of your reality, relying entirely on your physical senses and sheer localized willpower, it is an exercise in absolute futility.
It's just a recipe for exhaustion.
Operating this way immediately generates a dense frequency of anxiety. The internal narrative becomes, I am a singular, fragile entity. I must force this massive environment to yield to my desires right now.
I have to do it all.
I must consciously monitor and control every single moving variable in existence.
And that brings us perfectly back to the profound exhaustion we described at the very beginning of this conversation. That exhaustion is the direct result of trying to manually turn the gears of the entire universe using only your physical hands.
Yes, perfectly stated.
If you attempt to muscle your way into a completely new tier of reality, utilizing solely your physical avatar, it is functionally equivalent to sitting inside the cabin of a magnificent wind-powered vessel, completely ignoring the sails and trying to propel the ship forward by pressing your hands forcefully against the internal bulkheads.
That is a brilliant visual.
You are exerting a colossal magnitude of physical effort. Your muscles are burning, you are sweating profusely, and you feel as though you are working incredibly hard, but the massive vessel remains entirely stationary. You are completely disconnected from the actual source of propulsion.
That is a brilliant mechanical translation of the concept. The physical vehicle is a spectacular piece of biological engineering. It is an unparalleled instrument designed to receive and experience the dense sensory reality of this dimension.
It's great at experiencing.
But it was never intended to serve as the primary engine of creation. The avatar is the ultimate receiver and the ultimate experiencer. It is not the generator.
So, if pushing against the bulkheads is a waste of our finite energy, how do we actually capture the wind? How do we stop relying on the exhaustion of the avatar and connect to the propulsion?
It requires a profound, conscious act of detachment from the limited identity of the avatar. You must willingly relinquish the agonizing, hypervigilant requirement to control every single physical variable from a localized perspective.
Let go of the control.
By consciously stepping back from the avatar's narrow defensive viewpoint, you allow your consciousness to tap into the pure, infinite field. This field is a universal storehouse of potentiality that possesses absolutely no structural limitations.
The void of potential we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It is the realm where all possible realities exist simultaneously as uncollapsed wave functions, entirely unconstrained by the heavy density of space, time, or localized physical effort.
Okay, I need to push back again here because this sounds incredibly abstract. When you instruct someone to detach and relinquish control, my immediate concern is that this could be interpreted as a directive to become totally passive.
I see the concern.
It sounds like you are telling people to just sit on the couch, disassociate from their lives, and hope the infinite field magically delivers a new reality to their doorstep.
Yeah.
How is this detachment a practical, creative action and not just surrender to apathy?
That is a vital distinction to make. Detachment does not equate to apathy or disassociation. It is a highly active shift in the origin point of your energy.
The origin point.
As long as the localized ego dictates, I must independently manifest this specific outcome, I must violently force this heavy door open, it is operating under the deeply flawed assumption of separation.
Believing you are all alone.
It believes it is a solitary, isolated fragment engaged in a hostile war against an immense, indifferent universe. That generates panic and forced action.
Right?
But when your actions flow downward from the boundless space of universal potentiality, when you recognize that the physical action is merely the final, localized expression of a much larger energetic momentum, the paralyzing anxiety simply vanishes.
Because you realize you aren't the one required to carry the entire weight of the structural shift. You aren't generating the force, you are conducting it.
Exactly. The frequency of panic is replaced by a frequency of absolute quiet certainty. You transition from a state of desperate hope, like, I pray I have enough localized energy to force this reality into existence,
Right.
to a calm, unshakable recognition that the grand architecture of your new reality is already fully formed in the energetic field. And your physical avatar is simply walking the necessary steps to inhabit it.
That is a massive shift in perspective.
The heavy lifting, the profound structural reorganization of circumstances and synchronicities is handled by the infinite intelligence of the universe, not by the limited caloric output of your physical body.
You just walk into it.
You still take action, but it is inspired, fluid action, completely devoid of friction.
So the goal is to stop behaving like a tiny engine struggling to pull a massive train and realize we are the conductor, tapping into an infinite power grid.
Yeah.
But let's bring this down to the ground level. On a random Tuesday afternoon, when I am facing a deeply entrenched problem in my career trajectory, or I am caught in a repeating loop of conflict in a relationship, how do I actually apply this high-level physics?
How do you practically use it?
Right. How do I perform an audit on these autonomous constructs and ensure I am deliberately constructing the right box?
This is the precise moment we introduce the ultimate clarifying mechanism of this entire philosophy. We call it the litmus test for alignment.
The litmus test.
Most individuals, when attempting to organize their internal architecture, categorize their beliefs into binary columns. They label them either as objectively true or objectively false, or they classify them as morally positive or negative.
Which is how we are all taught to think.
This binary system is a trap that keeps you confined.
Right, because as we established in the beginning, objective truth doesn't exist to the subconscious. It only executes the blueprint it's given. And even a positive belief is still just a boundary.
Correct. The universe does not deal in moral judgments or objective physical truths. It deals purely in resonance. Therefore, instead of utilizing those outdated, paralyzing labels, every single belief, thought, and conviction must simply be passed through a singular metric, You must ask, is this construct aligned or misaligned with the specific reality I am attempting to inhabit?
That is the sole metric.
That is the sole metric of value.
I love the ruthless efficiency of that. It strips away all the heavy moral judgment, all the agonizing over whether you are a good thinker or a bad thinker.
Exactly.
It removes the need to debate the philosophical truth of your suffering. It transforms the process into pure, objective engineering. Does this specific energetic component fit the overall design of the machine we are trying to build? If not, it is useless.
To illustrate the profound power of this shift in metrics, let us examine two distinct breakthroughs. Consider the trajectory of a highly sophisticated market analyst and trader.
Okay, let's hear it.
This individual had achieved a state of immense comfort, consistently generating a vast ocean of resources that completely eclipsed the outcomes of their peers. Yet they had reached an absolute plateau.
They hit a ceiling.
They were confined within a very specific bracket of achievement. No matter what external strategies they applied, their physical reality simply refused to expand beyond that invisible ceiling.
They had constructed a very luxurious, well-appointed box, but they were still repeatedly hitting their head on the ceiling.
Precisely. They were operating within a self-imposed, heavily fortified boundary. To break through, they did not need to acquire a new, complex analytical methodology.
They didn't need to work harder.
They did not need to increase their physical exertion by staring at data streams for a greater multitude of hours. The breakthrough occurred purely on the architectural level.
What did they do?
By having their fundamental mental parameters intensely challenged, by realizing that their perceived ceiling was not a physical law of the market, but merely an illusion maintained by an outdated internal blueprint. They shifted the resonance of their belief.
They just changed the blueprint.
They simply expanded the geometrical shape of their conceptual box.
And what was the tangible result of that internal architectural shift?
They manifested an astronomical expansion of abundance almost instantaneously. A colossal vertical leap in their material reality was achieved in a fleeting span of time.
Wow.
The result completely defied all conventional linear logic regarding the ratio of physical effort to material reward. The magnitude of their new reality rapidly expanded to perfectly fill the new, vastly larger parameters of their newly chosen internal box.
The universe just filled the space.
The environment simply complied with the new instructions.
They drafted a larger blueprint,
Yeah.
and the physical universe rushed in to fill the newly created space. That is a mind-bending demonstration of the mechanics.
It's incredibly powerful.
But, well, it's easy to imagine this working for a wealthy trader. What about situations where the external environment is overwhelmingly dense, hostile, and seemingly inescapable?
The exact opposite scenario.
Let's examine a completely different end of the spectrum. Suppose an individual is born into a sprawling, neglected urban environment, a landscape universally defined by societal consensus as a place of endless, crushing struggle.
Right.
A location where the prevailing statistics dictate a fleetingly short lifespan and an insurmountable mountain of obstacles.
That is a crucial and necessary scenario to examine because it perfectly highlights the immense gravitational power of collective belief versus the sovereign power of individual architecture.
Okay, explain that dynamic.
If that individual passively accepts the heavy collective belief, if their subconscious absorbs the crushing societal consensus that they are structurally doomed by their geographic coordinates, then their biology, their neurological development, their perception of opportunity, and their entire life trajectory will absolutely flawlessly conform to that suffocating box.
They just become the statistic?
Their physical reality will perfectly validate the grim statistics of their environment.
So they become yet another tragic data point, proving the collective negative belief right. And in a dark way, the collective gets that grim, artificial ego boost. See, the environment really is impossible to escape.
Exactly. It feeds the collective construct.
Yeah.
To defy a collective external reality of that density requires an act of extraordinary internal engineering.
It takes immense focus.
It requires the individual to construct an internal belief system that is vastly larger and possesses a significantly stronger magnetic charge than the dense, crushing circumstances surrounding them.
They have to build a stronger magnet.
It requires a complete refusal to accept the inherited societal blueprint and the courageous, independent drafting of a new blueprint focused entirely on on boundless potentiality.
Wow.
The localized internal frequency must become so intensely powerful that it actively overpowers and repels the external environmental noise. It is the ultimate triumph of internal architecture over external projection.
So how do we distill this massive conceptual framework into a tangible action for the listener? Like, how do you, the person listening to this right now, actually alter your blueprint?
Give them the tool.
I want to give you a mechanism you can deploy this exact second. The ultimate litmus test for any thought, fear, or conviction that arises in your mind is a single, ruthless, uncompromising question.
Just one question.
You must stop whatever you are doing, look at the thought, and ask yourself, does this specific belief organically lead to the reality I desire to inhabit?
That is the only question that holds any relevance in the architecture of creation.
It sounds almost too simple, but it functions as a perfect guillotine for all self-sabotage. Does the deeply held conviction that you are inherently unlucky lead to the reality you desire?
No.
Does the belief that meaningful success requires agonizing biological burnout lead to the reality you desire?
No.
Does the belief that individuals from your specific background are disqualified from achieving greatness lead to your desired reality? No. If the answer is no, then the thought is entirely misaligned.
It is entirely useless.
It is not an objective truth. It is merely an autonomous, energetic construct attempting to hijack your emotional resonance for its own continued survival.
And what is truly fascinating about this realization is that it reveals simplicity as the ultimate form of sophistication. Once you identify a misaligned belief using this ruthless metric, the actual process of discarding it is radically different from what conventional wisdom suggests.
You don't fight it.
Exactly. Discarding a deeply embedded belief is not a violent, exhausting internal war. You do not need to throw kinetic energy at the turbulent water.
Because, as we established, fighting the construct generates the exact emotional friction it feeds upon. If you go to war with the belief, you are handing it a banquet.
Precisely. The act of discarding a misaligned construct is simply a quiet, resolute, and absolute withdrawal of emotional funding.
Emotional funding, I love that.
You consciously stop paying attention to it. You deliberately cease providing it with your heart's intense magnetic resonance.
You just look away.
When the thought arises, you merely observe it passing through your mental landscape as a neutral piece of data, and you deliberately choose not to attach any emotional weight to it.
And then what happens to it?
Without the continuous infusion of your emotional electricity, the energetic construct simply starves. It loses its structural integrity and dissolves harmlessly back into the infinite ether of potential.
It's the ultimate eviction notice. You just stop paying the energetic rent on that specific room, and eventually the construct has to vacate the premises.
Yes.
You completely cease the generation of the emotional magnetism that keeps the misaligned belief glued to your physical reality. If the internal narrative whispers, this upcoming endeavor is going to be incredibly difficult and fraught with peril, you don't aggressively fight back.
You don't argue with it.
You don't scream, no, it's going to be perfectly easy. You just observe the thought and calmly state, that is an interesting, highly misaligned perspective. However, I consciously choose not to fund that specific architectural reality with my energy.
And that calm refusal is the ultimate expression of individual sovereignty. In that moment, you cease to be an unconscious victim of inherited algorithms, and you become the conscious, deliberate director of your own electromagnetic output.
The sovereign creator.
You purposefully align the electrical signals of your conscious thoughts with the immense magnetic power of a heart, focused purely on the joy and certainty of your desired reality.
And the universe responds.
When those two forces, the electrical and the magnetic, are unified and directed toward a deliberately chosen design, the external physical universe has absolutely no choice but to conform. It is not magic. It is a mechanical certainty of the environment.
This has been an absolutely staggering, paradigm-inverting exploration of human mechanics. Let's weave the vast expanse of these threads together into a single cohesive tapestry.
Let's do it.
The incredible revelation we have uncovered today is that the intense friction you have been feeling, the profound biological exhaustion, the agonizing sense of being trapped behind invisible glass. Your core challenge was never that you were fundamentally broken.
Not at all.
Your challenge was never a lack of inherent talent, nor was it evidence that a hostile universe was actively conspiring against your success.
No, the universe was merely acting in a state of flawless, absolute compliance with your instructions.
Exactly. The profound, beautiful irony of your struggle is that you are actually being highly, relentlessly effective. You were operating as a master architect, an absolutely flawless builder of reality.
A perfect builder.
Your mechanism of creation was working perfectly. The singular issue was that you were utilizing your infinite, boundless potential to perfectly maintain the heavy architecture of the wrong box.
Building the wrong room.
You were using your immense power to brilliantly construct and defend a reality composed entirely of limitations.
The capacity of the human organism is truly without boundary. The physical external limitations we experience so viscerally are merely self-imposed illusions, solidified and made tangible only by our intense emotional attachment to them. When the electrical firing of the mind and the magnetic resonance of the heart are consciously unified.
When they come together.
When the limited perspective of the avatar steps aside and allows the current of boundless potentiality to flow unhindered through the physical vehicle, there is absolutely no barrier in the material world that can maintain its structure.
Wow.
You irrevocably shift from being a passive victim of random external circumstances to assuming your rightful position as the deliberate, sovereign creator of your own experience.
You transition from feeling like a helpless pawn playing a game where the rules are hidden to realizing that you are the primary engineer writing the underlying code of the simulation itself.
Spot on.
And as we conclude our time together, I want to leave you with a deeply resonant question. Something to let echo through the quiet, still moments long after this audio ceases today.
A final thought.
Imagine walking through your normal physical environment tomorrow. Imagine looking at every single frustrating limitation you encounter, every seemingly closed door, every inexplicable delay, every heavy moment of internal self-doubt.
And just seeing them for what they are.
And realizing, with a sudden crystal-clear wave of absolute certainty, that it is just a transparent, invisible wall you intuitively built to keep your localized self safe from the vastness of your own potential.
Yeah.
What happens to the grand architecture of your universe when you finally decide to just, stop defending the walls?